The evolution of AI and music seems to be just an extension of generative music and the things that were done in the 70s through the 90s through primarily Eno, but lots of other ambient artists who were drawing from uh, their own influences and heroes, which were the usual suspects are Phil Glass, Steve Reich, Terry Riley, all those people. And they're always mentioned in interviews. But what's interesting is that all this, even up until today, is an extension of conceptual art. And I've always said that music itself is a conceptual art, even if you're not doing conceptual work. In the article I just read about Endel, there's this collaboration between Endel and Plastic Man, and basically what they're doing is they're doing remixes, but they're running it through neural networks or whatever they're doing. They're using Alexa skills. It's an API where you just develop algorithms for Alexa, which is kind of interesting. What's happening now is that there's these new technologies that are being incorporated into this, basically the same thing. It's, the metaphors are DNA and seeds and stuff like that, and building blocks and Legos, the same metaphors that we've always been using for creativity, which is fine. But there's really no innovation here. This is basically just regurgitation of older stuff. It's a way to kind of be conceptual cool as a musician. I did that stuff too. But in my experience, what I did was that I tried that stuff and it wasn't that interesting. And then I started just kind of use it in the background with my regular stuff. Because AI music doesn't really give you anything to do. You need something that keeps you busy for 5 hours or 8 hours all day. You want to be busy. You want to work with your hands more. So I don't know. There's no new innovation here. A new aspect now, though, is this whole dystopian background and the anthropomorphization of AIs as real people. It's like, you're going to take away my job as a composer. So I better be very careful that I don't go too far with you. We're making people out of these AIs. I don't know. I think that's both interesting and dangerous because from a philosophical level, we're going there. We're having that dialogue with ourselves. We're creating these characters in our head that are informing what we're doing and informing our world and our world experiences, which is now connected with social media. So I think that's a dangerous aspect. It's taking it from art to this other weird world that I don't think fits with music. What I like about new tools is that it'll give you new ideas. Like I said before, it's something that just kind of runs in the background, and it's on the edges, it's on the periphery. It's sort of like watching TV in the background while you're doing something else. It's mostly background, but sometimes things stick out, and you say, "Oh, that's interesting," and then you have to capture it right away. You have to be vigilant of what's happening. It's like ideas from anywhere. You get an idea for a lyric or idea for a title while you're walking down the street, and you have to capture it some way. It's easier now, but in the past, I used to carry a card with me and a pen. It was a nerd card, basically. It was basically my little diary that I kept with me, and I would just note down things to do. But whenever I get an idea, I would put it down on the note card. But in terms of AI, just generating things in the background, it's sort of like an idea generator, basically. and then when something interesting pops up, you capture it, and then you use it in your work. But to have that idea generator actually be the music, I don't know. There's just too much to weed through. It actually is weeds. You just let the weeds grow, and then sometimes some interesting things grow up within the weeds. Or you could study the weeds. Weeds are interesting. They're part of the ecosystem. There's different metaphors that you could use to make your work interesting, which is what Eno was doing a long time ago. But like I said before, I think it has a short shelf life. But that's just my opinion, because I can compose music manually, and I prefer to do it that way, and have been lately composing all my music in notation on scores, because I can always just use the MIDI data for something. It just seems a very efficient way of working, and it makes me actually feel like a composer. The question becomes, what do we do with AI music? What do we do with the tools that we're making, or the existing tools like Alexa kits or Alexa skills? There'll be things in the future that will use data to generate new music. It's a new tool. It's like we made a new tool, but we don't know exactly how to hold it. We kind of do this with it, do that with it, see what comes out, which is interesting. But what might be the result of that might just be stuff we've heard before. And the whole idea is to make music that you never heard before. But that's a hard thing to do now, because there's not many new innovations with music as a sonic art anymore, except the aspect of psychoacoustics. And I think that's an area that hasn't yet been explored. It's how music exists in a 3D space. It's basically surround sound, but a more developed surround sound. It's an extension of stereo. But the problem with that is that it's very hardware intensive. And so you have to set up areas within your home just for that. And I don't think people are going to do that. But I think that's where the interest is. But in terms of trying to figure out what to do with AI, it's still too provisional. People still haven't come up with anything that's really catching my ear, and it's been a long time. People have been doing this for, I think, a decade now, trying to use this new tool, and they still kind of haven't figured it out. And I think they're going to continue on with this, but I don't know. In my view, I think it's still AI winter. And I think composers, if they're true composers, just need to get back to work and work with their instruments, basically the piano or the guitar, and explore these other areas. But I think that's just going to be a very small percentage of what you do as a composer. There's other things that are being developed, various softwares that are basically color organs. They're just using music as an input to drive visuals. And the software that I'm looking at now is actually, you have to pay for it. It's $50. And what an artist could do is actually do that themselves. It's a creative activity rather than using stuff that's generated by software. So that's another way that people are trying to monetize this new stuff. It's not new. This stuff is basically a color organ from 100 years ago. But to some people that's new, because maybe they never heard of the color organ. But those color organs from the 20s, I think, were pretty cool. But it's still an old idea. I just wonder if there's anything that's really new that's coming out. A good application for AI in a musical setting is to take whatever ones you want and then just put them into an input on the board, and then just use the fader to bring it in. They can even be running constantly. So like if you're working with a song, you have, say, 4 channels devoted to artificial intelligence running in the background. You can even bus them to one bus. And then just randomly just pull them up and see what's there. And you might find some interesting things. But in my experience, it's very rare. And what you're dealing with there is basically randomness. And randomness can be very interesting because you have to be in the right place at the right time. It's similar to just turning on the radio and just recording on whatever's on the radio like they used to do in the 60s, which can be cool. But it's very rare that that's going to be that interesting. But it's something that you could just set up in the background.